So yesterday I stepped out in the hallway, and then I came back out of the hallway.
And everything was on fire.
Shehan turned to me, and he goes, "So the internet's on fire."
Listen, I stepped out to, of course, after seeing Giannis's video, I went out to Chick-fil-A, got a half Sprite, half lemonade.
Did you actually?
I did.
Was it good?
It was very good,
Okay.
actually. So, maybe something to think about looking forward. But, but yeah, I came back and I saw people tweeting like, I wonder where this school is going to land. I'm like, I missed something.
Yes.
I missed something critical. And I did. Brent Zorneman from the Houston Chronicle saying that Texas and Oklahoma have reached out to the SEC about potentially becoming members.
Okay, so there's a lot to break down here. First and foremost, let's congratulate Brent Zorneman on the scoop. Our buddy
Yeah.
Brent Zorneman.
Yeah, that's
he wrote
big time.
He wrote the story of the summer. It's hot Brent summer.
I had a friend over who works for the Chronicle say, yeah, he met his page view goal in one day.
Yeah.
For the month.
Absolutely.
For the month.
He was, but congratulations to him. And I think it's worth mentioning. Let's start there.
Yes.
Brent Zorneman is not some fly-by-night blogger who's throwing stuff against the wall.
We won't throw out names, but yes.
He's not just trying. It's not clickbait.
No.
He's not
no.
just trying to get clicks.
If Brent Zorneman says it, Brent Zorneman is a
done his
super
research.
respected reporter.
And the Houston Chronicle, I mean, they have standards, right? Like, that's the short way to put it, right? They're not going to, and even, it's not just a tweet, right? It is a story that he put up.
Yes.
It is well-sourced. What he said on SEC Network is that his source wanted it out. So this is clearly somebody somewhere in some administration, we don't know which school, we don't know which area, somebody wanted this out because they wanted this chaos.
And the chaos did come down because it was timed really well because Jimbo Fisher was like walking to the stage at SEC Media Days for that time. And so Texas and Oklahoma have reached out to the SEC about potential membership. Let's talk about what this doesn't mean for a minute. This doesn't mean that Texas is going to play a conference game against Florida in September, okay? Let's all pump the brakes because it sounds like to me, correct me if I'm wrong, the earliest that we could see something like this realistically is probably 2025, correct?
So here's the deal, right? So like you mentioned, this is not something that's going to happen imminently, even if it is going to happen, which we still don't know at that point by any means. So back a couple months ago, the Big 12 went and kind of reached out to the TV networks and talked about renegotiating their deal. And to me, what that said at that time was, one, there's some momentum to try to think about what the future of the Big 12 could be. But two, I think that they wanted to just see what the offers would be like, right? If the offer was going to be good enough, if Texas and Oklahoma were going to be kind of satisfied with the money that they could get, I think that this becomes a non-issue, right? The TV network said, no, we're going to wait. The Big 12 has a grant of rights, which comes up in 2025, which means that all of the schools are locked in until 2025. Now, Texas and Oklahoma can get out of it. It would cost them what they would have received for that year as a penalty in addition to not receiving that money.
Right.
So basically over the course of 2 years, they'd have to pay $70 million.
Yeah.
Right. So this is not a small deal, right? It's hard to, I'm not saying it's impossible to see them go out early. And certainly, look, if this sets things in motion, and this might have been a reason that it was leaked too, maybe then all of a sudden the other 8 schools start looking around too, and then there's just sort of a consensus that we're going to break this up early, right? In which case nobody would have to pay penalties.
Right. So that's one of the things that is interesting about this is there's obviously a lot of moving parts and there's nothing guaranteed.
No.
And Longhorn Network probably isn't footing a $70 million bill.
I also think it's worth mentioning that this is probably not the only conference that these two schools have reached out to. I think that's probably fair.
Right. I think that a big thing right now is that just this report coming out, and certainly, they didn't even say, Zorneman didn't say anything like this. I don't think that this is by any means saying, like, Texas and Oklahoma are like, this is it.
Yeah.
They're just saying, hey, we need to think about it. We want to know what the offer is like. We need to know the landscape. And I think that they're going to do that with a number of conferences. Now, there's a lot of reasons why the SEC could make sense, but I do think certainly, Oklahoma's probably going to consider, do we want to be tied up with Texas still? I think that Texas is going to look around and say, okay, well, we have this Longhorn Network contract that's going to go to 2031. Well, Big Ten, what could you do with that? Pac-12, what could you do with that? ACC, what could you do with that? I mean, these are the two arguably biggest free agents that we've had in 25 years in terms of if they do decide not to re-up this contract with the Big 12, which does seem likely. And I believe that there's been some confirmation that might happen. But that doesn't mean that anything is decided at this point.
Right, and that's I think, it's long been portended that the Big 12 is going to break up. Like, that's just been kind of pretended basically since the dust settled. The last time, you remember, they went through the whole rigmarole with Houston.
Then the Big 12 has 10 teams.
And exactly right. They did the whole thing of the whole song and dance. It's long been portended that they're going to break up, but it's also long been portended that the people who are going to throw the switch on the detonator are going to be Texas or OU. Those are the power brokers within the conference. And so that's why I think everybody, if Iowa State
and Kansas,
God bless Iowa State, but if Iowa State was saying, we're flirting with the Big Ten, I think the Big 12 go,
cool.
Okay.
Have fun.
Cincy, come on down.
Yeah, exactly right. But with Texas and OU,
Right.
I mean, let's be real about that. And one other thing, and this kind of drove me nuts, we have to talk about what conference realignment is actually about. Okay? I'm seeing so many people who are like, why would the SEC want Texas? They've only won the conference 3 times in the last 25 years or whatever the number is. I'm like, guys, you are grossly missing the point of what conference realignment's about.
Right. And so certainly the first part of it is money, right? The first part is just more and more money. But the other thing that I will say is
the second part is also money. I want to be very clear.
But the third part, so the one thing is, right, like Texas and Oklahoma might not make much more money in the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably going to be comparable. Other SEC schools, that's going to be the pitch. South Carolina is going to make a lot more money. Tennessee's going to make a lot more money, et cetera, et cetera. For Texas and Oklahoma, I mean, the way that they have their contract set up with the Big 12, because the Big 12 is the third conference by quite a bit in terms of average revenue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of average payout. So, like, it's not like these programs are poor, because Oklahoma and Texas also own their third-tier rights and make money separately from every other Big 12 school off of those, and that's a $10 to $15 million advantage, right? So it is money, but I think that the other thing too is that, just looking at Oklahoma for a second, right? I think that Oklahoma feels like we have a perceived disadvantage being in the Big 12, and we can be that fourth playoff team every year, but to get from 4 to 1, maybe we can't do it here. Maybe people see us as having a ceiling. Maybe recruits see it as, well, but that's the good league where you're going to get drafted, and people don't see us that way as Oklahoma. Now, for Texas, and I wrote this a little bit in a piece on TexasFootball.com, and I don't want to be too rude about this, but there is a lot of, I think, of chasing A&M shadow, right? Of seeing Texas A&M, a program that has never been equal to Texas since post-World War II, surpass them in every way, right? And I think that if you're Texas, you're just like, I want to shut that down. And you know what? This worked for Texas A&M, and I think Texas A&M also did a lot of really good things to help themselves that I don't think Texas would do, even if they entered the SEC. But I think that has to be a huge part of it, because if Texas A&M is doing, what Missouri's doing right now, right? If they're a 7-8 win team, I don't think that there's sort of this level of consternation. But Texas A&M was number 5 in the country last year. They entered this year as a team that could make the college football playoff. I think that Texas feels like, okay, well, this last decade sucked. Let's just try something new.
I think it was the Dave Campbell's cover that really just pushed them to their limit, if we're being completely honest here.
Oh, no. Me doing that and helping with that Dave Campbell's cover screwed over Texas Tech.
So
way to go, Shehan. This is on you.
So there's a lot of tentacles, and I know you're going to talk about it expansively on Republic of Football, which you should subscribe to. Yes. But let's talk about reasons why this wouldn't happen. Okay, I just want to do this. First and foremost is there's a large entity in College Station who is going to do their damnedest to make sure it doesn't. Because, and more or less Ross Bjork came out and said that yesterday and said, we are 100% opposed to it. Now, I believe the number is 4 schools in the SEC would have to say no to prevent the SEC from extending the invitation. I think it's probably fair to say there are 2 no's, Missouri and A&M, their former Big 12 bunkmates.
Arkansas?
I think Arkansas really would have to consider saying no.
That's a bunkmate.
Maybe.
Now, the one thing that I'll say is Arkansas, I think, would love to re-up that game with Texas as a home and home, but also, like, you've seen – it's not a coincidence that Arkansas had a great 2000s and all of a sudden in 2012 on has been like, what happened? It's because Texas A&M came into the league. And now you're going to add Oklahoma, who's going to pull everybody from Arkansas, and Texas, who's going to pull everybody from Arkansas. I think that you have to ask competitive questions. And the other thing, too, that I think you have to ask is certainly we don't know how the conference would be set up. Would it be an East-West division? There's been talk about pods and stuff like that. If you're one of the Mississippi schools and all of a sudden you add Texas and Oklahoma to your division, maybe that's not attractive.
Sure. I'll just say this. I think A&M's an easy no.
Yeah.
I think Missouri's a pretty easy no.
Yeah.
I don't think there's another easy no.
I really think Arkansas is.
I think Arkansas as well.
I just don't think that, guys.
There's a lot of heated blood that goes into this.
Maybe, but at the same time, Arkansas needs money.
Not really. Money's not really the issue. It's recruiting ground. I think that's a much bigger issue for Arkansas than pure
trying to
dollars.
convince someone to go to Fayetteville.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't think Arkansas is an easy.
That was the pitch historically, right? Was that, yes, LSU, but Arkansas is the school that if you live in the Metroplex, we are your easiest path to play in the Southeastern
SEC.
Conference.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And at the second that changed, it is not a coincidence that all of a sudden the program has fallen apart.
Okay. All right. I disagree. I think that there's a lot of benefits for Arkansas making it a more robust conference in that regard. There's also we're going to see we're like Texas is its own enemy in this regard too, because here's the thing. Texas is this is going to only sound disrespectful, but I promise you this is just the reality of the situation in the Big 12. That Texas is the power broker in the Big 12. Okay,
that's no question.
Them and OU.
Yeah,
and
Texas half a step down OU.
Yes, yeah, exactly right. If they move to the SEC, they are still a big boy, but they're I was listening to Split Zone Duo, and they brought up the point that like they're going to be sitting right next to Greg Byrne at Alabama.
Yep.
Okay, and Auburn and Florida and Georgia and all these very powerful people that they are not going to get to run the conference anymore from like a strategic,
you go back to the
perspective.
kids table at that point.
No, it's not even the kids table. But you're going from being up here to being equals.
I want to be very clear, right? The current Big 12 that started in 2012 exists the way that it does and is structured the way that it does and has made decisions the way that it does strictly because of Texas's ego. This is the only reason the league exists like this. It's part of the reason that they didn't expand. It's part of the reason that they kind of held together like this. The whole breakup of the league came about because of the Longhorn Network, right? So every little detail of what's happened is because Texas had a thought one time, oh, maybe we like that. And so the Big 12 is like, well, we got to adjust, right? And if you go to the SEC, there are at least 5 programs that can just tell you to go sit in the corner, right?
Yes.
Like, no, not Texas is still going to be one of the biggest programs.
Correct.
Like, I don't want to act like, they're not going to be Vanderbilt, but like, yeah, I mean, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, LSU, Texas A&M now. Like, that's a bad start.
I know we got to get you to Conference USA Media Days here in a minute.
And Oklahoma, by the way.
Oklahoma, by the way. I mean, Oklahoma State, by the way, is going to make a stink about this. TCU and Tech and Baylor are going to make a stink about this.
Has Baylor ever made a stink during realignment talks? I'm not familiar.
I know I got to get you out of here, but I do just want to say this. If you are thinking about this from a quality of football perspective, don't think of these as football teams.
Yeah.
Don't even think of them as athletic programs.
Yeah.
Think of them as brands.
Yeah.
Okay? And say what you want about the University of Texas, but Texas is a premium brand.
Yeah. Well,
and if the SEC can add a premium brand, that is ultimately going to be better for the SEC.
Yeah. The thing that I'll say, right, is that obviously this publication in a lot of ways was started through the Southwest Conference, right? And I think it's been disheartening, to say the least, to see sort of that emphasis on regionality, that emphasis on rivalry, that emphasis on fan base kind of get replaced with this emphasis on national TV revenue, right? I think that's obviously very disappointing, but that's also the reality of where we're at, right? I mean, these programs, again, you see programs go to worse situations. You see Nebraska go to the Big Ten where they can't be competitive because of perceived better TV opportunities, right? And that's just the reality of the sport. And we can, complain and be upset about it.
And we will.
And we absolutely will. I'll tell you what, the one thing that kills me, right, is like all of a sudden, as someone who covers the state of Texas, just no matter where everybody ends up, going to be a whole lot harder for me to cover any road games, right? Yeah. That sucks. Yeah. But that's the reality.
Don't do it for Shehan.
Well,
that's what we're saying here. Think about our guy.
Shehan Jeyarajah is college football insider and the host of Republic of Football here on TexasFootball.com. I'm sure you'll have a podcast coming up here pretty shortly.
A shout out to Mallory, who was like, "Hey guys, we're all like kind of tired and a little out of it. Why don't we push the podcast recording to tomorrow?" Thank God.
Smart producer. God. That's good producing. Shehan, thanks for your time, man. Go tell Seth Luttrell we said hi. Hey, thanks for watching this clip here on YouTube. If you like this kind of stuff and you want more of it, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And remember, you can watch us live every weekday at noon at TexasFootball.com, Facebook, Twitch, or here on YouTube. And if you want more of the best coverage of football in the state of Texas, check out TexasFootball.com and become a Dave Campbell's Texas Football Insider at TexasFootball.com/subscribe.